A childhood friend of mine had a terrible start in life. He lived a block away. It wasn't the best area in the city. Somehow my parents made it work and kept me away from trouble. But his didn't have the same consideration. When he went to school, his clothing was always a little bit dirty, and he had such a bad attitude none of the teachers wanted to deal with it. Instead, they just sent him out in the hallway or detention. Marcus, but everyone called him Mark, started to become avoided by everyone but myself and his little sister. We bonded over something stupid back in first grade, and no matter what happened, never strayed too far from each other. I knew about his home life, which was something most other people weren't aware of or didn't care to learn. His mother was a kind person when she was sober, and not on whatever kind of drug she was currently addicted to. His father wasn't home very often. When he did come home, there was hell to pay. Mark would take his sister over to my place whenever his father stayed around. My parents knew about everything that was going on, and never questioned why Mark snuck into our house after midnight sometimes with his sister. At first, we tried to hide it, but soon we found out my parents wouldn't question it and just made breakfast for 3 kids. The problem with his father was that he'd gotten involved with a gang in some way. I found out when I got older that a concerned older woman called social services on his family. She turned up dead, and the case never went anywhere. Everyone was too scared of Mark's father taking revenge, if anyone dared to get his children taken away. He didn't seem to love them, but rather saw them as a way to get money from government assistance. If Mark's mother could have had more kids, she would have been forced to do so. One afternoon, I got a phone call. My parents weren't home, so I answered it. Mark on the other end, his parents fighting somewhere inside the house. "Can you come over and help?" he said in a low whisper, fearing he would be caught. Mark rarely ever outright asked for help with anything. Even at 11, I knew he was in trouble, and needed to get over there right away. Him and his sister couldn't stay in a house like that any longer. "I'll be 2 minutes," I replied. I took my bike to get there faster. Ditching it in the tall grass between the 2 houses, I crept up to his bedroom window he normally snuck out of. I couldn't hear the fighting any longer, and that wasn't a good sign. Before I could knock on the window, it opened and a bag was tossed out, nearly hitting me. Mark leaned out, a bit surprised to see how fast I had arrived. "We're leaving. I don't know what we'll do, but we'll manage," he said, explaining the bag. At the very least, I could talk him into staying at my place again. I wanted to suggest my aunt and uncle could take them both in, without telling his parents. Fully unaware that would be considered kidnapping. "Listen, Candy won't leave without her bunny. If she has a meltdown, it's all over, but she's always well behaved with you." That explained why he called me over. Reaching down, he helped me climb into his window. We listened for his father, knowing if we were caught, we would both be beaten. Candy, his little sister, a little over 5, already had a tear-stained face. She hurried over and hugged my arm, feeling safer with another person there. "Where's her bunny?" I asked. I could already tell if we forced her out of the house without it, she would freak. It wasn't often she had outbursts, but when they did happen, it lasted for hours. Her big eyes got wet thinking about her missing bunny. "Bun Bun's with Mommy," she told us in a small voice, already about to cry. That was bad. Her mother was always on the couch, and from what I heard over the phone, his father would be in the same room. Unless we got lucky and he left, we would need to leave without the bunny plush. If he hadn't left, we risked getting caught from Candy screaming. "Let's just check. Maybe we'll get lucky," I suggested. Mark wavered on the thought. No yelling came since I arrived, so maybe, just maybe, we could grab the bunny and leave without looking back. At least we could peek into the room and make a run for it if his father was still home. He nodded as he got on Candy's level, telling her we needed to stay quiet. If we didn't, we might wake up their mother. She understood that and made a promise not to make a sound. With her in the middle and each of us holding a hand, we started down the dirty hallway towards the living room. We needed to go through the kitchen first, and my eyes watered from the rancid smell of the place. I knew Mark tried to keep the place clean, but it was too much for an 11-year-old to handle. Voices made us freeze. Mark caught my eye. In that moment, we made the decision to press on, to look inside the room to see who else might be inside the house. From where we peeked from, I could see Mark's mother passed out on the couch. I got shocked to see needles and other things those lame drug talks in school warned us about scattered on the coffee table in front of her. I knew she got into things like that, but being so young, it was really the first time I'd ever actually seen it. I always respected her for doing her best for Mark and Candy, and yet this addiction and being beaten down by her abusive husband made it impossible for those efforts to count. His father stood beside the couch, red-faced and trying to intimidate another man in the room. None of us knew who he could be. I didn't see it at first, but Candy's pink bunny plush sat on the floor in front of her mother, making it impossible to get without someone noticing. When the other man spoke, we all tensed up. "Are you telling me you don't have my product? Or any money to replace it?" he asked in a voice just about to break into a rage. "I told you this bitch took it all. I left her alone for an hour, and look at this," Mark's father shouted back, gesturing at the ruined living room. The other man didn't appear impressed in the slightest. He looked disgusted, even being inside the room. He kicked at an empty, molding drink can with a scowl on his face. "Now, how are you going to repay me this time?" he asked, arms crossed. "Take her. She can work it off. She's done it before. Might teach her a lesson." My skin crawled at the words. Only after I got a bit older did I know what Mark's father had been implying. Candy let out a small cry, hearing someone wanted to take her mother. Thankfully, neither of the men heard, and we held her to keep her silent. This was our last chance to leave, but all three of us were too scared to move. "You know, I really doubt she took all of it. The amount I gave you would kill a few people. So where's the rest? I'll have her work off what she stole, but unless you cough up what she didn't take, I'll have you work it off as well." Mark's father stuttered, trying to argue when something made him stop. His face grew pale as he stumbled back. A newcomer literally appeared behind the other man. Something so unnatural it stunned him. A man who normally fought everyone as first response. "The woman died shortly after we arrived. I doubt she's worth anything unless you have clients I'm not aware of." The new figure spoke in a calm, clear voice. They were fairly tall and slim. A black hoof took a step forward, crushing trash underneath a terrifying thin leg. It had a human male body, even though it clearly wasn't human in the slightest. He was dressed in a tucked-in white dress shirt, halfway open and with small frills along where the buttons should be. A long, black mane of hair flowed halfway down his back. Long bangs obscured his face. Eyes hidden, but a long snout of pitch black smiled, showing off countless teeth. A long, thin tail tipped with fur lazily moved behind him. This creature looked far too elegant to be in the filthy room where it stood. The man wasn't startled by the creature's arrival, but instead was angry over the fact that Mark's mother had passed away so quickly without anyone noticing. Mark and Candy just lost their mother, even though Candy was too young to really understand what was going on. I held her tight, eyes watering. Somehow, hearing that their mother sat dead on the couch felt harder to accept than a monster standing in the living room. "Just take care of him. Search this house for any cash or any other goddamn product," the other man shouted at the monster. He lit up a cigarette and Mark's father started to turn away. Hands raised, his eyes never leaving the dark creature, taking measured steps towards him. "No, wait, my kids, you can..." His voice cut off by the creature moving so fast none of us could see it. 1 second his father stood there. Then the next he was being dragged behind the couch and out of sight. A horrible scream came that soon turned into a garbling noise. Candy could no longer hold in her tears. She started crying, getting the smoking man's attention. His eyes widened when he finally saw us. He crushed the cigarette into the carpet. Mark snapped to attention first. He started to drag Candy down the hallway with me. We needed to get the hell out of there. When we all turned, we thought we could make it before the man caught up. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared before, the other monster stood in front of us. Long arms reaching towards the three screaming and frightened children. We struggled and thrashed trying to get free, as he scooped us up to bring us into the living room. Instead of killing us, he placed us all in front of his employer. Candy almost in a screaming fit, but too scared to go all out. I shook, unable to calm myself down, let alone another person. Mark, however, stood bravely between the man and his sister. It felt like ages ago, but I heard him promise his mother he would take care of his sister no matter what. He never once went back on that promise. Not at all caring what happened to himself. He would do anything to protect her. The issue being, he was just a child with no power whatsoever.
At least this trip wasn't a waste. We can sell these 3 easy and make back what I would have gotten from that bastard. I should have just taken them a year ago with their mother. Christ. I missed out on a big payment letting her die.
The older man was grumbling as he looked down at us, as if we were a product instead of people. I couldn't believe what was happening. Monsters weren't real. These kinds of things just didn't happen. But the dark creature behind us proved that thought process wrong. I knew he just ate Mark's father, and yet I saw the man in front of us as more frightening. The creature would just kill us. This man would do such horrible things our young minds didn't fully understand yet.
Oh, selling children, are we? I didn't think you would sink so low.
The creature commented with a slight laugh. His voice light, and yet it almost sounded offended. I looked up at it, trying to see the hidden eyes and wondering if I read too much into the tone of voice.
Don't insult me and do your job,
the man shot back, his composure slipping.
And what is my job? How about you remind little old me about our verbal contract we made years ago?
I wasn't hearing things. This creature really hated the man in front of us. A flicker of hope came into my chest as I kept a grip on Candy's hand, wanting to run if what I suspected was true.
You very well know what we agreed on. You work for me in exchange for being able to eat anyone I tell you. You can't kill someone without a human's permission, right?
He huffed, turning away. In his anger, the man realized what I already knew far too late. His face pale and eyes wide in fear by the time he turned back around to see the monster whispering something in Mark's ear. My friend didn't say anything. He just nodded. An approval the creature needed. He moved fast, his hand on the other man's throat, lifting him off the ground. His former boss unable to speak to save himself.
We never did agree on a timeline, did we? So, I am canceling our contract. I believe I've gotten permission to do this the proper way.
The creature spoke, easily able to hold up a full-grown man with one arm. I shielded Candy from the sight, but we all heard the sickening crack of the man's neck. His body tossed aside in the piles of trash near the door. All 3 of us shaking, and Candy wailing over everything that had just happened. Mark moved first again. I found my body going in slow motion as I fought through the shock. When we were all picked up again, I couldn't even fight it. The creature had all 3 of us tucked under one arm. He walked into the kitchen and used his free arm to swipe off all the trash on the table. He dumped us on the creaking surface. My body shook as I looked up at that terrible face. He had just put us all on the table. What else was he going to do but eat us? Reaching down, he tore off the sleeve of his white shirt. Going over to the sink, he turned on the water until it ran warm to soak the torn fabric. We could have run then, but we were all fascinated by the sight. With the sleeve soaked, he shut off the water to come back over. Mark protested when the monster took Candy's face in one hand. With the other hand, he started to clean off her tear-soaked, dirty face.
Humans are so distasteful, I swear. Letting children rot away in such a place, and trying to sell them away for such disgraceful purposes. How has your race gotten this far? Now, there is a face under all that dirt. Come here, little one.
Mark and I watched the exchange, mouths slightly open. Neither of us stopped the creature from picking up Candy in his arms to bounce her slightly, trying to calm her down as one would with a toddler. We'd seen him kill Mark's father. Well, we'd sort of seen him do it. Our view was blocked, but we knew what had happened. And yet, this creature was being so kind. It made our brains shut down.
What are your names?
The creature asked, still holding Candy. We introduced ourselves, minds swimming in confusion. He nodded, as if our names were acceptable. Somehow, Candy calmed down as he let her grab hold of his long, wavy hair. His next question made us look at each other, wondering if this could all be a trick.
How long do humans normally live for?
He asked. 100, maybe? Mark offered. The creature paused, trying to calculate things we weren't aware of. He finally arrived on a good answer, and from the long sigh, we didn't know if it was a good one at first. As he spoke, it was a bit strange seeing an animal-like mouth form proper words.
I can last 100 years without eating. It'll be tough, but I suppose it can be done. Now, do you have anywhere to stay for at least 3 days? I'll need to arrange a human identity and...
What are you talking about? Mark butted in.
I'm clearly talking about adopting you three. I'll need a human name as well. Alois doesn't really fit in with your language, I suppose.
I'm, not their brother, I corrected when I realized this creature wasn't aware of that fact.
Oh, only you two then.
Eloise, the creature said with a shake of his head. He really didn't care if it would be 2 or 3 kids. We were simply dumbfounded. Why would this creature want to take in the children of the man he just ate? I wanted to say to Mark for him to just tell this thing to go to hell and that they could stay with me when the condition of the kitchen made me stop. After what they lived through, would staying with a monster be all that worse? Sensing our hesitation, Elois spoke up.
You may go to a different family member, or that foster care I've heard of,
he offered. No, not that, Mark said suddenly. I knew the reason for this outburst. We both heard so many horror stories about the foster system in our city. Deep down, we knew that there were good people out there. The issue being, there had been 3 reports of separate foster families being arrested due to abuse in the past few years, and it had tainted our young minds about the system. Not only that, but Mark's father constantly blamed the foster system that raised him for being in the place he was in life, instead of his own shortcomings. After all, being fostered sounded worse than prison, and it was the reason why Mark never sought out help for him and his sister. Without any other good options, he gave in and took Elois up on the offer. If we stay with you, can you show me how to be strong enough to protect my sister? Mark asked while staring down the creature with hard eyes.
We'll protect her together. However, I must get things sorted. If you are a friend and not part of this family, then please see if you can take these 2 in for a few days. I'll be back to get them.
You promise? Candy spoke in such a small voice that shocked us both. She also approved of her new scary-looking guardian. Smiling, with a mouth that did not do him any favors, Elois nodded.
I promise. Now, scoot you 3 as I clean up this mess.
Candy was set down, and Mark took over holding her. She brought up the reason why he came over in the first place. Her bunny was still with her mother. My body felt cold as I thought about who needed to go in and get it. Getting down on her level, Elois asked if they could leave it with her mother and make her happy. After all, Candy was going out on a sleepover, and it might help her mother not miss them so much. His sweet-talking got her to agree. And for the first time, Candy left the house without her plushie. I took them home, all of us still dazed over what we'd went through. We expected my parents to come in asking about what happened to Mark and Candy's parents, but they didn't. The weekend passed by normally, aside from us not really feeling like playing very much. It worried my parents, but they didn't say anything. They wanted to give us some time to be ready to talk about if something bothered us. That conversation never came. On the Monday after school, we were all in my room when a knock came to the door. We snuck down the hallway to peek over the stairs as we saw 2 police officers and a dark-haired man be invited in. My parents led them into the living room. We waited a few minutes until feeling ready to go down and interrupt the conversation. Mark and I already knew what they were going to say. Their mother was gone from an overdose, and his father was missing, and suspected dead as well. Candy didn't really understand what was going on, and the tears started when she demanded to see her mother, and the adults were saying she couldn't. The dark-haired man swooped in to comfort her. He looked extremely handsome, as tall and slim as he was in his monstrous form. Candy calmed down a bit after he spoke with her, and let her hold his hand.
You might not remember me, but I'm your Uncle Elijah. We met once before. With your father missing, you'll be living with me if that's all right.
Without any doubt, this man really was the creature from before. Somehow, he changed things, so legally he was an uncle that didn't exist before. Whatever magic went into it, I wasn't able to ask about it. For the past 3 days, I'd been worried about my 2 friends being adopted by a stranger. After seeing a kind smile on Elijah's human face, my worries faded. He gave them time to pack and get ready to leave. My parents appeared relieved that the 2 children they couldn't help without risking our family's safety had finally found a good home. A new worry came to my mind when I said goodbye, thinking it could be the final time I would see those 2. The next few weeks were a blur. The funeral for their mother went by so quickly I don't even remember it that well. It took them a while to get the dust settled. But finally, Mark, Candy, and Elijah found a house to move into. The house only ended up being a 10-minute walk away. I didn't lose my best friend as I feared. When Mark came back to school, our teachers treated him better. His new guardian got him the help he needed for his behavior issues at school so he could improve his grades. Mark went from being one of the worst students to one of the best in the next few years. You would think having a monster for an adopted father would cause some issues. After watching him and Candy grow, I realized the real monster had been their biological father. The one who adopted them was a bit aloof at times. Still, it was clear to everyone how much he loved his 2 human children. So much so, I feared he may eat them up one day. When it came to monsters, that was always a risk. Knowing Elijah might not be able to hold himself back, Mark got hard-pressed on becoming a doctor, to help others before his time ran out. With support from a real parent, I fully believe he's able to accomplish that goal. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow, and see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.